Captain Lisa Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the UES Liberty and watched the stars move past the viewing window. Her ship was coming home after 6 months in deep space. The mission had been a success. They had made contact with a peaceful alien colony near the Kepler system and established trade agreements. The crew of 200 was excited to see Earth again. Daniel Wright sat at his station reviewing the diplomatic reports. As the ship's diplomatic officer, he had spent weeks learning the alien language and customs. The Kepler aliens were gentle creatures who shared their knowledge freely. They had warned Earth about something called the Harvester Coalition, but their warnings seemed like old stories from long ago. Maya Johnson checked the tactical systems one more time. She was responsible for the ship's weapons and defense systems. The Liberty was built for exploration, not war, but it carried basic defensive weapons. Maya always kept them ready, even though they had never been used in combat. The bridge was quiet except for the soft hum of the ship's engines. The crew was looking forward to shore leave and seeing their families again. Captain Rodriguez had promised them 2 weeks on Earth before their next mission. Everything felt normal and peaceful. Then the communications officer spoke up. His voice was shaky and worried. "Captain, I'm picking up a distress signal from Earth. It's very weak, but it's definitely from the home planet." Rodriguez moved quickly to the communications station. "Put it through the main speakers?" The signal was full of static and hard to understand, but the words that came through made everyone on the bridge freeze with fear. "This is Colonel Jake Patterson of the Earth Defense Force. Earth is under attack. Repeat, Earth is under attack. Unknown alien forces have invaded all major cities. The government has fallen. Military resistance is scattered. Any Earth ships receiving this message, do not approach Earth orbit. The enemy has massive ships surrounding the planet." The signal cut out and the bridge was silent. Rodriguez felt her heart beating fast. "Communications, try to re-establish contact with Earth." "I'm trying, Captain, but there's nothing. All normal Earth communications are offline." Daniel Wright was already working at his station. "Captain, I'm detecting multiple large objects in Earth's orbital space. They're huge, much bigger than anything humans have ever built." Maya Johnson's tactical screen was lighting up with warning signals. "Captain, I'm reading at least 20 large vessels in Earth orbit. Their power signatures are off the charts. These ships could destroy entire cities." Rodriguez made the hardest decision of her life. "I'll stop, hold position here. We need more information before we do anything." Over the next few hours, they managed to pick up scattered radio transmissions from Earth. The picture that emerged was terrifying. Alien ships had appeared without warning 3 days ago. They had demanded complete surrender within 24 hours. When Earth governments tried to negotiate, the aliens had begun attacking major cities. The aliens called themselves the Harvester Coalition. They had come to harvest Earth's population for their biological and intellectual resources. They spoke about humans like they were crops to be collected. The alien leader, something called Queen Zarthik, had broadcast a message saying that humans would be processed efficiently, and their suffering would be minimal. But the aliens had not expected what they found on Earth. Instead of surrender, they faced resistance from every human settlement. Military units that should have been destroyed kept fighting. Civilians who should have been cowering were building weapons and attacking alien positions. "Colonel," Patterson's voice came through the radio again. "Any Earth ships out there? This is Jake Patterson. I'm broadcasting from an underground bunker in what used to be Denver. The aliens think they can just take us like animals. They're wrong. We're not going quietly. We're fighting back and we're making them pay for every step." Dr. Helen Carter's voice joined the transmission. "This is Dr. Carter speaking from the Resistance Science Division. We've been studying their technology from crashed ships. These aliens have done this before to other planets. They call it harvesting. They take entire populations and use them as resources, but they've never faced humans before." Rodriguez listened to more reports throughout the day. The aliens had established processing centers in major cities where they were herding captured humans. They had expected the same response they got from other species: fear, surrender, and cooperation. Instead, they were getting something they had never seen before. Humans were not just fighting back. They were learning from every encounter. They were adapting their tactics. They were turning the aliens' own weapons against them. Most importantly, they were refusing to give up even when facing impossible odds. The Liberty's crew worked through the night, monitoring communications and planning. Their response: they learned that 2 other Earth ships had escaped the initial attack. The exploration ship Frontier under Captain Rick Sullivan was hiding in the asteroid belt. The research vessel Horizon, commanded by Captain Beth Morrison, was conducting reconnaissance of the alien fleet. As dawn broke on the ship's artificial day cycle, Rodriguez called her senior officers together. "We have a choice to make. We can run and try to find safety somewhere else in the galaxy, or we can fight for our home and our people." Daniel Wright spoke first. "Captain, the Kepler aliens told us about the Harvester Coalition. They said no species has ever successfully resisted them. 47 worlds have been harvested over the centuries." Maya Johnson checked her weapon systems again. "Captain, we're 1 ship against a fleet. But if we're smart about it, we can hurt them. These aliens aren't expecting resistance from humans." Rodriguez looked out at the stars and thought about her home planet. Somewhere down there, humans were fighting and dying to protect their families and their freedom. The aliens thought they were just harvesting another helpless species. They were about to learn how wrong they were. "We fight," Rodriguez said. "We make contact with the other Earth ships and we fight. These aliens picked the wrong species to mess with." The crew of the Liberty prepared for war. They had been explorers and diplomats just days ago. Now they were humanity's sword in the darkness, ready to show the galaxy what humans could do when their backs were against the wall. The harvest had begun, but it was not going according to plan. 3 months had passed since the aliens first arrived at Earth. The Harvester Coalition had expected their operation to be finished by now. Instead, they found themselves fighting a war unlike anything in their long history of conquest. Colonel Jake Patterson crouched in the ruins of what used to be a shopping mall in Denver. His resistance cell had grown from 12 survivors to over 300 fighters. They had weapons taken from dead aliens and explosives made from household chemicals. Every day brought new volunteers who had lost their families to the harvesters. "Tony, what's the status on the supply run?" Patterson asked the former factory worker who had become one of his best squad leaders. Tony Garcia wiped alien blood from his hands. "We hit another supply convoy this morning, Colonel. Got enough power cells to keep our weapons charged for 2 weeks. The bugs are starting to travel in larger groups. They're learning to be afraid of us." Patterson smiled grimly. The aliens called humans many things, but never warriors. They thought of people as livestock that had somehow learned to bite back. They could not understand how a species they considered primitive was causing them so much trouble. Dr. Helen Carter emerged from her makeshift laboratory in the mall's old electronics store. She had been a theoretical physicist before the invasion. Now she was humanity's expert on alien technology. Her hands were covered in burns from working with power systems that were never designed for human use. "Jake, I've got good news and bad news," she said. "The good news is I've figured out how their shield generators work. The bad news is their main ships have shields we can't break with anything we've captured so far." "What do you need?" Patterson asked. "Time and more samples. But I think I'm close to something big. These aliens have been doing the same thing for centuries. They've never had to innovate or adapt. We're forcing them to face problems they've never encountered before." Across the city, Linda Brooks was teaching a group of children how to hide from alien patrols. She had been an elementary school teacher before the invasion. Now she was training the next generation of survivors. The children were quick learners. They had to be... "Remember," she told them, "the tall ones with 4 arms can see heat, but they can't hear very well. The flying ones can hear everything, but they can't see in the dark. The rock creatures are nearly blind, but they can feel vibrations through the ground." One of the children, a boy named Peter, raised his hand. "Miss Brooks, why don't the aliens just leave us alone? Linda knelt down to his level. Because they think we're not important, Peter. They think we're just things they can take and use. But they're wrong. We're people, and people don't give up. High above Earth, Captain Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the Liberty and watched alien ships move between the planet and the moon. Over the past 3 months, her small fleet had grown. They had captured 2 alien cargo ships and converted them for human use. More importantly, they had rescued over 5,000 humans from alien processing centers. Captain, Maya Johnson reported from her tactical station, we're getting reports from the surface. The Resistance destroyed another processing center in what used to be Los Angeles. The aliens are pulling back their ground forces to more defensible positions. Daniel Wright looked up from his communications console. I'm monitoring alien communications. They're reporting significant delays in their harvesting schedule. For the first time in Coalition history, a harvesting operation is behind schedule and over budget. Rodriguez studied the tactical display. The alien fleet was spread out around Earth in a standard harvesting formation. But that formation assumed the local population would be cooperative or at least passive. It was not designed to deal with active resistance. Maya, what's our next target? There's an alien supply depot on the moon. It's lightly defended because they never expected anyone to attack it. If we take it out, we can disrupt their logistics. For weeks, Rodriguez nodded. Signal the frontier and the horizon. Or going hunting. On the surface, the resistance continued to grow. Former police officer Amanda Phillips had organized civilian survivors into effective fighting units. She had learned that humans had advantages the aliens did not expect. Humans were creative, adaptable, and absolutely ruthless when protecting their families. Carlos, have you finished modifying those alien weapons? She asked the tech specialist who had once repaired computers for a living. Carlos. Rivera held up a weapon that had been taken from a dead alien soldier. Better than that, Amanda. I've figured out how to make them explode when the aliens try to use them. We're going to start leaving booby-trapped weapons for them to find. The Resistance had learned to use the aliens' own advantages against them. The Coalition forces were used to dealing with species that fought according to predictable patterns. Humans fought dirty, unpredictably, and with a viciousness that shocked their enemies. In the underground bunkers, Dr. Patricia Young worked to keep the fighters alive. She had been a surgeon before the invasion. Now she performed battlefield medicine with tools that were never meant for human anatomy. She had learned to remove alien toxins from wounded fighters and to treat injuries caused by weapons that human medicine had never encountered. The aliens used biological weapons designed to incapacitate their targets for easy collection. She explained to her medical team. But human physiology is different from the species they've harvested before. What should paralyze us just makes us angry. Former Navy SEAL Alex Turner led night raids against alien positions. He had trained his team to move silently through the ruins of human cities and strike without warning. The aliens had superior technology, but they had never faced opponents who could disappear into terrain they knew intimately. The key is to never fight them on their terms, he told his squad. We hit fast, we hit hard, and we disappear before they can respond. Make them afraid of every shadow, every sound, every moment when they can't see us. As the months passed, something unexpected began to happen. The aliens started making mistakes. They began to show signs of stress and fear. Coalition soldiers who had been confident conquerors were now nervous occupiers who jumped at unexpected sounds. The alien communications that Daniel Wright intercepted revealed growing concern among Coalition leadership. They had never encountered a species that became more dangerous as the harvesting continued. Every human they captured or killed seemed to make the survivors fight harder. Queen Zarthik herself had begun making personal appearances on Coalition communication channels. She insisted that the harvesting would proceed as planned. But her messages were becoming more frequent and more desperate. For the first time in her long career of conquest, she was facing a species that refused to be conquered, the Resistance. Networks had grown to include millions of humans. They shared information, coordinated attacks, and supported each other across continents. The aliens found themselves fighting not just scattered survivors, but an entire species that had united against them. Captain Rodriguez received a transmission from Colonel Patterson late one night. "Captain, we're ready for the next phase. The aliens think they're harvesting Earth, but we're about to show them what humans really are when someone threatens our home." The awakening was complete. Humanity had remembered what it meant to fight for survival. The aliens had expected to harvest a helpless species. Instead, they had awakened something that would change the balance of power in the galaxy forever. 6 months after the first alien ship appeared in Earth's sky, the galaxy was about to hear something it had never heard before. The surviving human leadership had made a decision that would echo across the stars for generations to come. Captain Lisa Rodriguez stood in the communications chamber of the Liberty, now heavily modified with captured alien technology. She had been chosen by the scattered remnants of Earth's government and military to speak for all of humanity. The weight of 4 billion dead and 3 billion survivors rested on her shoulders. The alien fleet hung in space, around Earth like hungry vultures. Queen Zarthik had demanded one final surrender broadcast from the human survivors. She expected to hear the words of defeat that had come from 47 other harvested worlds. Instead, she was about to learn what made humans different from every other species in the galaxy. "Are you ready, Captain?" asked Daniel Wright from his position at the communications console. The diplomatic officer had helped craft the message that would soon reach every corner of Coalition space. Rodriguez nodded. She thought about all the reports that had reached them from Earth's surface. Colonel Jake Patterson's resistance fighters had turned major cities into war zones. Dr. Helen Carter's scientists had learned to build weapons from alien technology. Ordinary people like Tony Garcia and Linda Brooks had become extraordinary when their families were threatened. The transmission began. Rodriguez looked directly into the camera that would carry her image across the galaxy. Behind her, the scarred surface of Earth was visible through the viewport. The ruins of human civilization bore witness to what the Coalition had done and what humanity had become in response. "I am Captain Lisa Rodriguez, speaking for all of humanity," she began. Her voice was calm but carried an edge of steel that had been forged in 6 months of impossible warfare. "You came to our world expecting to find victims. You classified us as resources to be harvested like wheat in a field. You were wrong." Queen Zarthik watched the transmission from her flagship, expecting to hear the familiar words of surrender. Instead, she saw something in the human's eyes that she had never seen before in all her centuries of conquest. There was no fear, no desperation, no pleading for mercy. There was something far more dangerous, absolute determination. "For 6 months you have tried to break us," Rodriguez continued. "You have killed billions of our people. You have turned our cities into ruins. You have used weapons designed to make us submit to your will. But you have failed to understand the most basic truth about humanity. We are not victims. We never were victims. We are the Retribution." The words were broadcast across Coalition space, reaching the homeworlds of all 4 member species. For the first time in galactic history, a harvested species was not just fighting back, but declaring war on their harvesters. On Earth's surface, the resistance networks that had grown to span continents listened to their chosen representative speak for them all. In hidden bunkers and ruined cities, humans who had lost everything found new strength in her words. Colonel Jake Patterson and his fighters had gathered in the ruins of the Denver State Capitol building. They had chosen this location for its symbolic value. Where human government had once made laws, they now made war. "You see us as prey," Rodriguez's voice continued through speakers they had built from salvaged alien technology. "But predators become prey when they choose the wrong target. You have spent centuries harvesting species that surrender when faced with superior force. We are not those species." Dr. Helen Carter had worked without sleep for 3 days to ensure the transmission would reach every Coalition world. She had modified their captured alien communication systems to broadcast on frequencies the Coalition could not block. Every member species would hear what humanity had to say. "We do not surrender," Rodriguez declared. "We do not submit. We do not cooperate with our own destruction. When you came to harvest us, you awakened something that your empire has never faced before. You awakened a species that fights harder when backed into a corner." The effect on coalition forces was immediate. Alien soldiers who had been confident conquerors began to show signs of doubt. They had been told that humans were a primitive species that would be easy to process. Instead, they found themselves in a grinding war against an enemy that seemed to grow stronger with every defeat. Former police officer Amanda Phillips had united survivor communities across 3 states into a coordinated fighting force. She listened to Rodriguez's words while planning the next phase of their resistance campaign. "You want to know what makes humans different from the 47 species you destroyed before us," Rodriguez continued. "We remember our dead. Every human who dies at your hands becomes a reason for the survivors to fight harder. You think you are weakening us by killing our people. Instead, you are creating an army of the damned who have nothing left to lose." The transmission was having effects beyond Earth. On coalition worlds, other subjugated species were listening to broadcasts of Rodriguez's speech. For the first time, they were hearing a harvested species that refused to accept its fate. Tech specialist Carlos Rivera had managed to tap into coalition communication networks. The reports he intercepted showed growing unrest among the coalition's own population. Species that had been enslaved for generations were beginning to ask why they had never fought back like the humans were fighting. "We are not the first species you have tried to harvest," Rodriguez said, her voice growing stronger with each word. "But we will be the last. Because after we are done with you, the galaxy will know that predators can become prey, that harvesters can become the harvested, that those who deal in death and slavery will face retribution." On the coalition flagship, Queen Zarthik felt something she had never experienced before: fear. Not fear of death, but fear of failure. Fear that her empire, built on the systematic destruction of entire civilizations, might finally face consequences for its actions. Former Navy SEAL Alex Turner and his special forces teams had been conducting deep penetration raids against coalition positions. They had learned to use captured alien ships to strike targets far from Earth. Rodriguez's declaration gave new meaning to their mission. "You came here expecting to add humanity to your collection of extinct species," she continued. "Instead, you have created your own extinction event. We are coming for you. Not just the humans on Earth, but every human in the galaxy. We will hunt you across the stars. We will turn your own weapons against you. We will show the galaxy what happens when you try to harvest a species that refuses to die." The speech reached human survivors who had been taken to other worlds for processing. In coalition prison camps and processing centers, humans who had been broken by months of captivity suddenly stood straighter. They had been told they were alone, that Earth had fallen, that resistance was hopeless. Now they knew their people were still fighting. Surgeon Dr. Patricia Young had converted an abandoned hospital into a treatment center for resistance fighters. She listened to Rodriguez's words while treating wounded soldiers who had lost limbs to alien weapons but refused to stop fighting. "We are the species that tamed fire and split the atom," Rodriguez declared. "We are the species that turned deserts into gardens and reached for the stars before we could barely walk upright. We are the species that has never, in all of human history, accepted extinction quietly." The message was being translated into hundreds of alien languages and broadcast across the galaxy. Species that had been conquered by the Coalition centuries ago were hearing words they had never thought possible. Absolute defiance in the face of absolute power. Captain Rick Sullivan of the Frontier and Captain Beth Morrison of the Horizon had joined their ships with the liberty to form humanity's first space fleet. They listened as their chosen representative spoke for every human who had ever lived. "So here is our answer to your demand for surrender," Rodriguez said, her voice now carrying the weight of an entire species' rage and determination. "We reject your authority. We deny your right to exist. We declare war not just on your forces, but on everything you represent. You wanted to harvest us. Instead, you have planted the seeds of your own destruction. The transmission ended with an image that would haunt coalition leaders for years to come. Captain Rodriguez stood with the ruins of Earth behind her and the stars above her, representing a species that had been pushed to the edge of extinction and chosen to push back. Queen Zarthik realized that she faced something unprecedented in coalition history. For the first time, a harvesting operation had not just failed, but had created an active enemy. The humans were no longer just fighting for survival. They were fighting for revenge. The declaration had been made. Humanity had spoken with one voice to an empire that had never heard the word no from its victims. The galaxy would never be the same. 1 year after the first alien ship had appeared in Earth's sky, humanity launched the greatest offensive in galactic history. The combined human fleet, now grown to 12 ships through captured and rebuilt alien vessels, moved through space toward the Coalition's regional command center on Nexus Prime. Captain Lisa Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the Liberty, now rebuilt with the best human and alien technology available. The ship that had once been designed for peaceful exploration was now humanity's flagship of war. Weapons that combined human creativity with alien power lined its hull. "All ships report ready for combat," reported Captain Jennifer Clark from the warship Defiance. She had been a merchant marine captain before the invasion. Now she commanded one of the most feared ships in human space. Captain Steve Mitchell's voice came through from the heavy cruiser Retaliation. "Target confirmed, Admiral. Nexus Prime lies directly ahead. Coalition fleet moving to intercept." Rodriguez had been promoted to admiral by the surviving human leadership. She now commanded not just a ship, but humanity's entire military response to the coalition threat. The responsibility weighed heavily on her, but she carried it with the determination of a species that had refused to die. "Daniel, what are you reading from coalition communications?" she asked her diplomatic officer, who had become their expert on alien languages and customs. Daniel Wright's face was grim as he monitored the alien transmissions. "They're calling in reinforcements from 3 sectors. Queen Zarthik herself is commanding their defense. She's broadcasting orders to stop the human advance at any cost." Maya Johnson worked at her expanded tactical station, now connected to weapon systems that would have been impossible to imagine 2 years ago. "Admiral, I'm reading over 40 coalition vessels in defensive positions around Nexus Prime. They've got 3 times our firepower." Rodriguez smiled coldly. "They also said we had no chance when they first arrived at Earth. How did that work out for them?" The battle for Nexus Prime began with a coordinated strike from human forces. But this was not just a space battle. Special Forces teams led by former Army Ranger Nicole Davis had already infiltrated the planet's surface using captured alien stealth technology. Nicole crouched in the shadows of a coalition processing center, watching alien guards patrol the perimeter. Her team of 12 humans carried weapons that combined military training with alien technology. They had been dropped on the planet 3 days ago with a mission that could change the course of the war. "Chris, are the charges ready?" she whispered into her communicator. DEMOLITIONS expert Chris Thompson was former mining engineer who had learned to use alien explosives with deadly effectiveness. "Ready to go, Nicole. When these blow, the whole complex goes up. More importantly, we'll free about 10,000 prisoners." The prisoners were not just humans. Intelligence gathered over the past year had revealed that the Coalition's crimes went far beyond Earth. Nexus Prime held representatives of dozens of species that had been harvested over the centuries. Some had been held for decades, kept alive for experimental purposes. Nicole's team moved through the complex like ghosts, using skills learned in the ruins of human cities. The Coalition guards had grown complacent after centuries of dealing with broken, defeated prisoners. They were not prepared for humans who had come to fight. In space above the planet, the battle raged with an intensity that shocked both sides. Human ships, outnumbered but not outfought, tore through Coalition formations with tactics that had never been seen before. Former diplomat Grace Williams commanded the converted alien ship Freedom. She had learned to pilot coalition vessels better than their original crews. Admiral, I'm breaking through their left flank, moving to engage their command ship. Dr. Paul Jackson, now serving as the fleet's xenobiologist and intelligence officer, had spent months studying coalition behavior patterns. Admiral, their formation is breaking down. They're not used to enemies that coordinate this effectively. The coalition forces had expected to face the same kind of resistance they had encountered from other species, brave but ultimately futile attacks by desperate survivors. Instead, they found themselves fighting a coordinated military campaign by humans who had learned to use the coalition's own advantages against them on the planet's surface. Nicole's team had reached the main processing center. What they found there would haunt them for the rest of their lives. The coalition had not just been harvesting species for resources. They had been conducting experiments, learning how to break down civilizations more efficiently. "My God," whispered Chris Thompson as they entered the research facility. "There are genetic samples here from 47 different species. They've been collecting and studying entire civilizations." Nicole activated her recording equipment. The galaxy needed to see what the coalition had been doing in secret. Tanks filled with genetic material from extinct species lined the walls. Computer systems contained detailed records of how each harvesting operation had been conducted, but they also found something else: resistance. Hidden in the depths of the facility, survivors of harvested species had been secretly organizing. Led by a group of Threnody rebels and Corvan freedom fighters, they had been waiting for an opportunity to strike back. "You are the humans," said their leader, a Threnody named Veltar, whose people had been enslaved by the Coalition for over 2 centuries. "We heard your captain's declaration. We have been preparing for this day." The alliance that formed in the depths of that processing center would reshape galactic politics for generations. Humans, Threnody, Corvan, and representatives of a dozen other species united with one purpose: to end the Coalition's reign of terror forever. Above the planet, Admiral Rodriguez faced Queen Zarthik in direct combat for the first time. The Coalition leader's flagship was 10 times the size of the Liberty, armed with weapons that could destroy planets. But size and firepower meant nothing if your enemy refused to fight by conventional rules. "Admiral," Maya Johnson reported, "I'm reading massive explosions on the planet's surface. Nicole's team has succeeded in destroying the processing centers." The explosions were visible from space as facilities that had operated for centuries went up in flames. More importantly, the prisoners held in those facilities were now free and joining the fight against their captors. Queen Zarthik's voice came through the communication system, filled with rage and desperation. "Humans, you do not understand what you are destroying. The Coalition maintains order in this galaxy. Without us, there would be chaos." Rodriguez activated the open channel response that would be heard by every ship in the battle. "Order built on slavery. And genocide is not order, it's tyranny. And tyranny ends today." The battle turned when the liberated prisoners joined the fight. Coalition soldiers found themselves facing not just human attackers, but their own former victims armed with stolen weapons and decades of accumulated rage. Former FBI agent Kevin Lee had been coordinating intelligence networks across human space. His reports from agents throughout Coalition territory painted a picture of an empire in collapse. "Admiral, we're getting reports of uprisings on over 30 Coalition worlds. Your declaration has inspired resistance movements that have been dormant for centuries." The Coalition fleet began to retreat, but the humans pursued them relentlessly. Ships that had once carried the terror of the Coalition across the galaxy now fled from human vessels built from the wreckage of their own forces. Nicole Davis and her team had captured Vex Commander Zekthar, one of the Coalition's most brutal leaders. Under interrogation, he revealed the full scope of the Coalition's crimes across the galaxy. The systematic nature of their genocide became undeniable evidence that would be broadcast across Coalition space. "How many species?" Nicole asked the captured alien commander. 47 harvested completely," Zekthar replied, his translator making his insectoid voice sound almost human. "Hundreds more enslaved or partially harvested. It is the natural order. The strong consume the weak." "Not anymore," Nicole said quietly. "The weak just learn to bite back." As the battle for Nexus Prime ended with a complete human victory, the effects rippled across the galaxy. The Coalition's image as an invincible force was shattered. Species that had cowered before Coalition threats for centuries suddenly saw their oppressors as vulnerable. Admiral Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the Liberty and watched Coalition ships fleeing in all directions. The regional command center was in ruins, its archives captured, its secrets exposed to the galaxy. "Admiral," Daniel Wright reported, "we're receiving surrender offers from Coalition garrison commanders on 12 different worlds. They're abandoning their positions rather than face human retaliation." The reckoning had begun. The empire that had built itself on the systematic destruction of other species now faced judgment from those it had tried to destroy. Queen Zarthik's flagship limped away from the battlefield, her crew demoralized and her authority shattered, but this was only the beginning. The humans had proven that the Coalition could be defeated. Now every oppressed species in the galaxy knew that freedom was possible. The war for galactic liberation had begun, and humanity would not stop until every Coalition processing center was destroyed and every enslaved species was free. The message was clear. The harvest was over. 2 years after the first alien ship had appeared in Earth's sky, the galaxy had been transformed beyond recognition. The Harvester Coalition, an empire that had ruled through terror for over 1,000 years, lay in ruins. The liberation that had begun with one human captain's declaration of defiance had spread to every corner of known space. Admiral Lisa Rodriguez stood in the observation deck of the UES Enterprise, humanity's first purpose-built starship designed for exploration, rather than war. Through the vast windows, she could see the orbital shipyards around Earth, where vessels from dozens of species worked together to build a better future. Earth itself bore the scars of its ordeal, but those scars had become symbols of strength, rather than suffering. The planet's population had been reduced from 7 billion to just under 3 billion, but those survivors represented something new, a species that had been tested by the ultimate trial and emerged stronger. "Admiral," came the voice of Captain Daniel Wright, now commanding his own exploration vessel. "We're receiving the final reports from the Liberation Fleet. The last Coalition holdouts on Corvin Prime have surrendered. The war is officially over." Rodriguez nodded, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders that she had carried for 2 long years. The Liberation Fleet, composed of ships and crews from 17 different species, had spent months hunting down the remaining Coalition forces that had refused to accept the new reality. The new reality was the Terran Alliance, a coalition that included not just humanity, but also the Threnody, Corvin, and 14 other species that had been freed from Coalition rule. Unlike the Empire it had replaced, the Alliance was built on cooperation rather than conquest, on liberation rather than harvesting. Colonel Jake Patterson, now General Patterson, commanded the Alliance's joint military forces from a base built in the ruins of Denver. The former resistance fighter had become a symbol of how ordinary people could become extraordinary when their freedom was threatened. "The integration is going better than we hoped," he reported during the daily briefing. "Former Coalition worlds are requesting Alliance membership faster than we can process the applications." The Vex homeworld voted yesterday to join the Alliance and face justice for their crimes. Dr. Helen Carter had become the Alliance's chief technology officer, overseeing the integration of dozens of different technological systems into new tools for exploration and defense. Her laboratory, built from the remains of an alien processing center, was now developing peaceful uses for technologies that had once been used for oppression. "We've successfully reverse-engineered the Coalition's faster-than-light communication system," she reported. "But we're modifying it to serve all Alliance members equally rather than just the dominant species. Every world will have access to the same information and the same voice in Alliance decisions." The transformation extended far beyond technology. Amanda Phillips, the former police officer who had become a resistance leader, now served as the Alliance's ambassador to the Corvan Republic. She was teaching former slaves how to build democratic institutions and protect their newfound freedom. The Corvan are adapting to self-government faster than anyone expected, she reported from the capital city of New Corvan. They've established a parliament, a Bill of Rights, and a system of courts. Most importantly, they've built monuments to the species the Coalition destroyed. They're determined never to forget the cost of tyranny. Carlos Rivera had become the Alliance's chief communications coordinator, managing the complex task of keeping dozens of species in constant contact across thousands of light years. His office in the rebuilt city of New Geneva was filled with translation equipment and cultural guides for species that had been isolated from each other for centuries. The hardest part isn't the language barriers, he explained to visiting diplomats. It's helping species that have been enemies for generations learn to trust each other. But they're all motivated by the same thing, making sure nothing like the Coalition ever happens again. The trials of Coalition war criminals had become the galaxy's most watched events. Former Navy SEAL Alex Turner, now heading the Alliance's Justice Department, had spent months gathering evidence of crimes that spanned centuries and dozens of worlds. Queen Zarthik will face justice for the murder of over 4 billion sentient beings, he announced at the opening of her trial. But more importantly, these trials will establish the principle that genocide and slavery are crimes against all civilized species, not just the direct victims. The trials revealed the full scope of the Coalition's crimes, but they also revealed something else, the courage of species that had resisted in secret for generations, Dr. Patricia Young, now the Alliance's chief medical officer, had documented. Cases of hidden resistance that had lasted for decades. The Threnody maintained secret schools to preserve their culture, she testified. The Corvan hid weapons and supplies for a rebellion they planned for over a century. Even species the Coalition thought they had completely broken were preparing to fight back. They just needed someone to show them it was possible. That someone had been humanity, but the Alliance leadership was careful not to claim credit for the galaxy's liberation. Former diplomat Grace Williams, now the Alliance's Secretary General, made this point in every speech she gave. Humans didn't liberate the galaxy, she would say. We just reminded the galaxy that liberation was possible. Every species that threw off Coalition rule liberated itself. We just happened to be the first to say no loudly enough for everyone to hear. The Alliance faced challenges that no galactic government had ever confronted. Dr. Paul Jackson, now serving as the Alliance's xenobiological advisor, was working to restore species that had been partially harvested by the Coalition. We have genetic samples from 47 extinct species, he reported to the Alliance Council. With careful work and some luck, we might be able to restore some of them to life. It won't bring back the individuals who died, but it will give their species a second chance. The most difficult challenge was dealing with Coalition member species who had been willing participants in the harvesting. The Vex and Nexari had not been slaves like the Threnody and Corvan. They had been active partners in genocide. Nicole Davis, now commanding the Alliance's peacekeeping forces, had to maintain order on worlds where former victims and former oppressors were learning to live together. Justice doesn't mean revenge, she would tell her peacekeepers. Our job is to make sure that everyone gets a fair trial and a chance to build something better. The moment we start acting like the Coalition, we become what we fought to destroy. The rebuilding extended to Earth itself. Cities that had been reduced to rubble were being rebuilt with technology that combined human ingenuity with the best innovations from dozens of species. The memorial in what had once been New York City bore the names of every human who had died during the invasion, along with the names of victims from every species the Coalition had destroyed. Former FBI agent Kevin Lee had become the Alliance's intelligence chief, but his job now focused on preventing conflicts rather than fighting wars. We monitor communication between member species and help resolve disputes before they become battles, he explained. The goal is to make sure we never need another liberation fleet. Chris Thompson, the demolitions expert who had helped destroy Coalition processing centers, now used his skills to build rather than destroy. He was overseeing the construction of research stations where Alliance scientists studied peaceful applications of former military technology. Every weapon we captured is being converted into a tool for exploration or construction, he reported. The Coalition's planet crackers are now being used to mine asteroids. Their biological weapons are being modified to cure diseases. We're beating their swords into plowshares on a galactic scale. As Admiral Rodriguez prepared for humanity's next great mission, she reflected on how much had changed. The Enterprise was about to leave for the Andromeda Galaxy, carrying a crew of humans and aliens, to make contact with civilizations that had never heard of the Coalition or the Alliance. "What will you tell them about us?" asked Captain Beth Morrison. Now serving as the Enterprise's first officer, Rodriguez looked out at the stars and thought about the journey that had brought them to this point. "I'll tell them that we learned the most important lesson in the galaxy. Sometimes the only way to save civilization is to refuse to be civilized in the face of those who would destroy you." The Enterprise departed Earth orbit carrying representatives from every Alliance member species. Their mission was not conquest or harvesting, but exploration and peaceful contact. They carried with them the message that Captain Rodriguez had first broadcast 2 years earlier, that victims could choose to become something else entirely. Behind them, they left a galaxy that was learning to live without fear. Children of multiple species played together in schools that taught the history of the Liberation War alongside mathematics and science. They learned about the time when one small planet had said no to an empire that had never heard the word before. The Coalition was gone, destroyed not by superior firepower, but by the simple refusal of its victims to remain victims. In its place stood something that had never existed before, a galactic community based on the radical idea that all sentient